Hello everybody, and welcome again. Let's join together and sing My Hope is Built on Nothing Less. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When darkness veils His lovely face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every hug and storm, I anchor within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. He shall come with trumpet sound. Oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone. Lord, blessed to stand before the throne. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. Jesus Christ, I think upon your sacrifice. Jesus Christ, I think upon your sacrifice. You became not me, poured out to death. Hosanna in the highest. Start again. Blessed be your name in the land that is plentiful. Blessed be your name in the land that is plentiful, where your streams of abundance flow. Well, hello again, everybody. Good to be back again with you this Sunday. I hope you all are doing well. You know, what a interesting and amazing world we're living in these days. I was just in town yesterday and couldn't believe how quiet everything seemed. And I had to think as I was driving in and out that even the presidential campaign seems like it's gone away. Just a few weeks ago, we were getting all kinds of campaign and political messages on our televisions and radios, and signs out in people's yards about who they're going to vote for. And now it seems like we've got other things on our mind, doesn't it? I haven't really been involved in politics or things like that, but I did go to a presidential campaign or a political speech one time. That was in 1992 when George Bush the first was running against Bill Clinton. And I remember standing along the parade route with my friend and just watching this motorcade come by with all the motorcycles and SUVs and 3 presidential limos. And I had to think, wow, the amount of security that is paid for and put out for the president of our country. This is just one leader of one country in our world, which is one small planet in our solar system, which is one of many solar systems in this vast universe. We sure put a lot of effort into keeping him safe. You know, in our passage today, and this is Palm Sunday, I don't know when you're watching this, maybe you're watching it on Saturday or Monday or whenever, but we're thinking about Palm Sunday this weekend. And in our passage today, and it comes from Luke 19, you can be turning there, Jesus chooses quite an unusual way of entering Jerusalem. Now, Jesus is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He is the creator and master of the universe. And you would think if anybody deserves a massive motorcade full of all the pomp and circumstance that you could ask for, it would be Jesus. But that's not what we see. So you can be turning to Luke 19. And as you're going there, maybe it's helpful to set a little context. In our study of John at church, we noted how Jesus, about 6 months prior to this, had come from Galilee down to Judea, and he has spent the last 6 months of his ministry ministering in the areas of Judea around Jerusalem. That was at the Feast of Tabernacles. Now it's it's approaching the Feast of Passover. And at the beginning of chapter 19, we see Jesus making a little trip over to the town of Jericho, which is to the east of Jerusalem. And now he's on his way back from Jericho into Jerusalem. And we're going to pick it up in verse 28 of Luke 19. And when he had said these things, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And when he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany, these are 2 small towns just on the outskirts of Jerusalem to the east, at the mount that is called Olivet, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying, "Go into the village in front of you, where on entering it you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever yet sat. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' you shall say this, 'The Lord has need of it.'" So those who were sent went away and found it just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owners said to them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they said, "The Lord has need of it." And they brought it to Jesus, and throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. And as he rode along, they spread their cloaks on the road. As he was drawing near, already on the way down the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." And he answered, I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out. And when he drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, Would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation. There's some things that strike me about this story. The first one is the remarkably accurate fulfillment of prophecy. We read in the book of Zechariah, chapter 9, verses 9 through 10, these words, Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I love seeing God's promises fulfilled in Jesus. We know that what's happening here is part of God's plan from eternity past. And the way that it unfolds in Luke 19 is remarkable down to the detail. Here comes Jesus riding into Jerusalem, or towards Jerusalem, on the back of a donkey. And not just any donkey. It is the foal or the colt of a donkey that Jesus is riding on. Just like it was predicted back in Zechariah chapter 9. God's plans and God's purposes are at work in Jesus, and they are continuing to this day. God's plans will not be thwarted. God's plans will not be thrown aside by anything that takes place in our world. We can take comfort in that fact that God's plans will come to pass. The second thing that I see here that really strikes me is the nature of God's kingdom. God's kingdom is one that contradicts human understanding. It's one that turns our thoughts about power and privilege upside down, right on their heads. And here's a couple of ways. First off, we see here a king who is humble. You know, while all other kings of the earth rode horses and magnificent beasts surrounded by symbols of power, their attendants, their guards, their soldiers, their chariots, their flags and pennants, gleaming armor, Jesus rode on the back of a donkey. In fact, he rode on the foal or the colt of a donkey. While other kings displayed their power to lord it over their subjects, Jesus joined those whom he had come to serve. This was a clear illustration of what we read in John 1, that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He put on skin and dwelt among us. He lived the way we lived. He dealt with the things that we dealt with. He experienced what we experienced. Jesus, our King, is humble. The second thing I see about this king is that he is a king filled with compassion. Now, get the picture. Jesus' route from Bethphage and the town of Bethany took him over the Mount of Olives and down the other side to Jerusalem. And as he comes over the Mount of Olives, the city of Jerusalem comes into view. And when he sees the city, Jesus does something extraordinary for a king. Now, if this was an earthly king, that king would have come over the mountain, seen the city spread out before him, and said, It's magnificent. Look at those walls. Look at that temple. Look at that palace. And his heart would have exulted at the wonder of his kingdom. He would have been filled with pride, and his heart would have beat faster at the prospect of taking control of this city and ultimately the entire nation of Israel. But Jesus is different. Jesus stops, and when he sees the city, he weeps over it. And this isn't the only time that this happened. A few chapters before in Luke, in chapter 13, Jesus says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I would have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing." It doesn't say particularly that he weeps here in chapter 13, but he definitely is using words of mourning at their continued unbelief and stubbornness regarding him. And he says, right after he says these words in chapter 13, he says that these particular people will not see him again until they say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord," and that time has arrived. And Jesus is weeping now in chapter 19 because he sees a city that does not realize that in roughly 30 years it will see destruction like it has never known. When the Roman general Titus comes with his forces and lays siege to the city and ultimately destroys its walls, destroys the temple, conquers the city, and scatters the Jewish people like they had never been scattered before, a scattering which would last for centuries and centuries. And he weeps for the people of Jerusalem, and I believe all of Israel, who for generations have been groaning under the weight of sin and bondage, waiting for their Messiah to come and deliver them. But when their Messiah did come, to live among them and to reconcile them to God, the vast majority of them missed him. In fact, they did worse than that. They rejected him. And because of their continued unbelief, they were going to face judgment and destruction. And Jesus weeps for them. I think today that as Jesus looks down, I wonder if he weeps for a world that has rejected him. A world that does not see him. A world that is openly resisting him. I wonder if he weeps for those who claim to be his disciples, yet when trying times come, as they are about to for Jesus in this passage, when those time comes, his disciples forsake him and flee. I wonder if he weeps for them. We have a compassionate king. The third thing that I see about this upside down kingdom is that our king will deserve the praise our king will receive the praise that he deserves. As his disciples are crying out their praises, there are the ever-present Pharisees watching everything with a critical eye. They're blind to what is going on. The disciples, I think, are getting who Jesus is, or at least they have some idea. The Pharisees have no idea. The whole thing just seems preposterous to them. These words that the disciples are crying out should be reserved for a king. They should be reserved for the very Messiah that they are expecting. But instead they're being shouted to this itinerant preacher who is sitting on the back of a foal of a donkey, one of the lowliest animals you can imagine. And to them it's blasphemy. "Teacher, tell your disciples to be quiet. Rebuke them. Don't let them blaspheme like this." And Jesus says, "I tell you, if those were to be quiet, or if these were to be silent, the very stones would cry out." The stones would cry out? Yes, they would. God will receive the glory that is due his name. It makes me think of Psalms chapter 19, where it says that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals his knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. Even things that we think of not having a voice like you and I have voice, like I'm using to speak to you, even those things declare the glory of God. And when his people do not declare his glory, his creation does. Because God will receive the glory that is due his name. Just a couple of weeks ago we read Psalm 46, where God says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." He will receive his praise. He is humble, yes. He is compassionate, yes. But he will receive the praise that he deserves. And it's our privilege to declare his glory and his praises with our whole being. When we sing songs, when we speak to each other, we declare his glory with our words. When we live our lives, when we interact with our families and our communities, we declare his glory with our actions. So may your Palm Sunday this year be full of joy as you think about the significance of what Jesus has done here and what he is about to go through for you and me. God bless you.